Initially, I was going to make this video about how the sequel trilogy is a bad trilogy, whether you love or hate the individual films, because each film is a reaction to the last, and good trilogies aren't reactionary, etc., and so forth. But since The Rise of Skywalker came out, a bunch of people are already talking about that, so instead, I decided to talk about The Mandalorian, a show that seemingly everyone loves. Everyone except me. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but there are a lot of points where it could have been better. But before I start dissecting the show, I will say this. I love Dave Filoni's shows. He's a great storyteller and, in my opinion, the best Star Wars creator working today. That being said, his season 1s always suck. Whether it be Clone Wars, Rebels, or even Avatar, a show which he didn't create but still helped make, Filoni always takes a while to get moving on a show. But once he helps the show find its feet, it's amazing. Because of that, I have confidence that as long as Filoni works on The Mandalorian, each season will be better than the last. That being said, this first season of The Mandalorian is very up and down. The first episode is awesome. It introduces us to the Mandalorian perfectly, shows us how he operates as he collects a bounty. Once that's done, he takes a new, strange job, makes some new friends and alliances. Then at the end of the episode, we're given a huge twist with the reveal of Baby Yoda. Suddenly, the show gave us something we were never expecting. Story. You see, The Mandalorian was advertised to us as a slice-of-life show, showing us a bounty hunter as he did his job day to day, maybe picking up some friends along the way, but generally not having an overarching storyline. Something like The Clone Wars, Rebels, or Batman the Animated Series, where we follow the same characters as they tackle different problems each episode, with maybe a couple multi-episode arcs here and there. Instead, with the introduction of Baby Yoda, we were given story. Suddenly the show had a very distinct, overarching storyline that it was going to follow that revolved around Baby Yoda. What will the Mandalorian do with Baby Yoda? Will he keep him or give him to the client as he was paid to do? Now, the introduction of story isn't a bad thing. But once story is introduced into a show, you can't go back, and The Mandalorian's first season misunderstands that. Episode 2 is a meandering episode that is ultimately pointless, since the characters end the episode pretty much the same as when it began. The Mandalorian comes back to his ship being stripped, so he has to go get a hairy egg for the Jawas to get his parts back, then he has to work with Queel to fix the ship and leave. And in the middle, he fights off some other parties interested in Baby Yoda. If that episode had never happened, nothing would have changed. Besides finding out that Baby Yoda is force sensitive and the other bounty hunters are after him, the episode is pointless. And those elements could have easily been worked into another episode and added maybe 5 minutes. Then we get more story in episode 3 because it's directly related to Baby Yoda again, and it's great. The Mandalorian completes his bounty, gets paid, feels bad, gets Baby Yoda back, and makes his escape with the help of his clan. Then episodes 4 through 6 are all pointless. They're all jobs the Mandalorian takes that somehow go wrong, and he ends the episode leaving with Baby Yoda, once again essentially ending the episode the way it began. And we finally get some more story in episodes 7 and 8 as it once again pertains to Baby Yoda. Now, all those episodes I just complained about would have been fine if one of two things had happened. Option 1, if Baby Yoda hadn't been introduced until later, or not at all. To be clear, this is not my ideal version of the show. I adore Baby Yoda just like everybody else, but if he hadn't been introduced at the end of episode 1, then we wouldn't have been introduced to story. Suddenly we have the show we were expecting. A slice-of-life show where the Mandalorian takes different jobs, deals with various problems each episode, even meets some friends that he brings together in the finale. In this show, I would have been fine with a whole episode dedicated to the Mandalorian showing a new bounty hunter the ropes, and we could be floored by the Baby Yoda introduction halfway through the season or even in the finale. But because we were given a taste of story in the first episode, we expect that story to move forward in the consecutive episodes. And when instead the story just stops and waits for the Mandalorian to get a hairy egg, we stop caring. To be fair, 1 or 2 of those episodes is fine, but especially when the series is only 8 episodes long, we expect the story to move along, not be left waiting half the season for the story to get going. Option 2, if the filler episodes were more interesting. Probably my biggest problem with the show is that most of the characters aren't interesting. Now, before you start yelling at me, I'll talk about the characters that I do like. The Mandalorian is exactly what he's supposed to be. He's a man with no name type character that we slowly learn more about over the course of the season, and he's done perfectly. Baby Yoda is also perfect, absolutely adorable, and an interesting MacGuffin. Baby Yoda is exactly what we want him to be. IG-11 is also amazing, with Taika Waititi brand humor that's not overplayed, and enough personality to make him interesting, but not so much that it makes things uncomfortable. Then we get to probably my favorite character in the whole show, Kuiil. Kuiil is an Ugnaught, which is a race we don't see too much of, who was enslaved by the Empire until he earned his freedom, a fact which he is very proud of. Unfortunately, that's where the list of characters I liked and found interesting ends for me. Now I know what you're thinking, he forgot about Cara Dune. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I don't think Cara Dune is particularly interesting. She's a badass rebel shock trooper, keeping her head down after the war. And if that's all you want, that's fine, but I was expecting more. Especially in a show where we have a Mandalorian who hates droids because of his childhood trauma, an IG droid that is programmed to self-destruct rather than be taken by the enemy, and a retired Ugnaught that was a slave but earned his freedom through the work of his hands and takes pride in that. I was expecting a little bit more than just she was a shock trooper once. But my biggest problem is with the side characters, because they're mostly boring and a lot of times done better in other things. To be fair, Werner Herzog's The Client, Carl Weathers' Grief Karga, and Amy Sedaris' Peli Moto are all fine to good. I actually quite liked Amy Sedaris' character and her little posse of droids. Probably my favorite cameo in the show, to be honest. But past them, the characters are all super boring. I specifically wanted to talk about the crew from episode 6. None of these characters are interesting. They start taking the Mandalorian's things and trying to forcibly take his helmet off for no reason, as if they're 80s middle school bullies, and it makes no sense. I half expected them to try and give the Mandalorian a wedgie and stick his head in a toilet or something. They're all supposed to be criminal professionals. Why would they act like they're 10? And then each of them individually is a caricature. Mayfeld is an ex-Imperial sharpshooter, and the gag is that an Imperial sharpshooter means nothing, since all Imperials suck at hitting things. It's a fine joke, but that's about it for his character. Berg is a big dumb brute. Xian and Kin, I think, are crazy siblings who don't really care for each other and love to lick things. And Raznar Malk is the older, smooth-talking, backstabbing leader. Why not give these characters some personality? Like Zeb from Rebels, he's a big brute, but he has personality outside of that. Or how about Hondo from the Clone Wars? He's an older, smooth-talking, backstabbing leader, and he has a very distinct, eccentric personality that's memorable and interesting. He would have been so much more interesting than some generic human. And these are just characters within Star Wars that Filoni created and/or helped create, I might add. On top of that, the episode plots were boring as well. The strange man with no name comes into a town and helps them defend against a local raiding group is a storyline that's been done many, many times. But the Mandalorian's version felt rushed. I didn't believe that the villagers were prepared to defend themselves once the Mandalorian and Cara Dune were gone. I didn't buy the random village lady falling for the Mandalorian. I didn't believe the Mandalorian was almost willing to take his helmet off and stay with the random village lady. And what's strange is Filoni himself has done this storyline better in the Clone Wars. In Season 2, Episode 17, titled Bounty Hunters, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka have to help a village and some bounty hunters defend against Hondo and his pirates, and it was far more believable and interesting than the Mandalorian's version. I could go into the other episodes, but I don't want to risk sounding too ranty, so I'll just say that the filler episodes felt like Filoni had done them better elsewhere, even within the Star Wars universe, and if they were better, it would have made the whole season stronger. Well, those are my thoughts on The Mandalorian. Stay till the end to hear my thoughts on Moff Gideon and the finale. So what do you think? Am I being too harsh on The Mandalorian? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and bell icon. It really helps out the channel. If you have anything you'd like to hear my opinion on, or you just want to talk to me, tweet me at Let's Get Context or comment below. If you'd like to hear more from me, check out my podcast, Are We Rolling, wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to support me, head to patreon.com/mudwitmedia. I'll hopefully have some rewards up there for this channel soon. I'm not quite sure what the next video will be, but hopefully it'll be out sometime next month, so look forward to that, and I will see you all then. I'm so tired of the Empire being the villain in every Star Wars thing now, and yes, that includes the First Order because they're basically the Empire. The Mandalorian was literally advertised to us as, quote, set after the fall of the Empire and before the emergence of the First Order. We follow the travails of a lone gunfighter in the outer reaches of the galaxy, far from the authority of the New Republic, end quote. And even in the show, we're told that the Empire is gone and the client is just an Empire enthusiast that has a few dirty stormtroopers. So why at the end is it just the Empire again? Imagine how cool it would have been if it ended up being one of the crime syndicates at the end, like Black Sun or something. We could have finally seen some of the criminal underworld we're always told about but are never shown in live action. That would have been so much more interesting. But instead, it's just the Empire again. And I don't care about Moff Gideon whatsoever. He's just another evil Imperial officer. And it's as if Favreau and his team knew he wasn't interesting enough, so they gave him a Darksaber to compensate. Giving a random character we just met a random object that we know and love doesn't make them interesting. I still don't care about Moff Gideon, and now I'm irritated that an Imperial prick has Sabine's Darksaber. Does that mean he killed Sabine, a character that I actually care about? That's like when they gave Beckett a throwaway line that he killed Aura Singh, a bounty hunter we know and love. Having a new character kill a character we like doesn't make them cool or interesting. If you want to make me care about Moff Gideon as a villain, distinguish him from the mass of evil Imperial officers we've had over the years. Give him a personality, quirks, and then give him the Darksaber. R2 with limbs was cool though, wasn't he?